All right, let's take a look at the market here, starting off with the Dow Jones Industrial Cash Index. Basically, I'm looking for a resumption of higher high, and basically looking at this 25,800 level here. If we get up to this pivot high, I'm looking for this thing to continue to move higher and ultimately take out this all-time high here and put in a new all-time high. And looking at the Dow Jones Transportation, similarly, it's looking forward to come up to this 11,361, this pivot high, and eventually take out this high, all-time high, 11,423.92. Now, if we get a little bit of a pullback, I'm looking at this 10,977.80 pivot low here for potential support area. And let's go back to the Dow Jones Industrial just to mention the pullback pivot low for the support, this 29,965.80, this pivot low here. If we get a little pullback, that's where I'd be looking for support. So, and looking at the S&P 500, S&P 500 again on a pullback, 2802.49, this pivot low. But I'm looking for this thing to take out this high and eventually come up and put in a new all-time high above the 2872.87. And the NASDAQ 100, NASDAQ 100 seems like putting in a little bit of a double bottom here on this high here. So this is 7308.52. That would be the near-term support. If it break that, then the major support that I'm looking at is 7158.78. And again, I'm looking for a new potential new all-time high at 7508.59. Then finally, we're looking at the Russell 2000. The Russell 2000 support down here at 1663.50 or 1652.70 down here at these pivot low area. Looking for it to come up and take out the all-time high at 1708.60. Here we're looking at ROKU. ROKU see this gap up after earning and ran it up at this level above 60, then pull back. It seems to be forming a little bit of a triangle here. So I'm watching this level here, 58.35, this high here, and this low here, 53.61, to see what kind of price action there will be. So if it comes down here, then we'll take a look at the possibility of going long or short. If it's long, we expect this thing to push back up. But if it's short, then we expect it to come down, break below this level, and possibly come down and retest the post-earning pivot low here, and possibly even fill in some portion of this gap. If it come up here and break this trend line, essentially break out of this triangle, then we'll see would it be able to get above this 58.35. And if we get above this 58.35, then it basically form a higher high, higher low. Then we're essentially looking for this all-time high to possibly get retested. So looking at the daily, as you can see, there's this gap here, and it broke above this this high here on a couple of days after earning. So it's it is a little bit of an inside bar here, just by 1 penny, and it is doing a little bit of one time framing up, one time framing down. So essentially, it's just chopping around. Also, just to note on ROKU, I just added a trend line down here to make this thing a channel, so you could also see could be a channel coming down as well. So so it break this the 53.61 and forming a lower low. Then basically watching for this lower boundary of this channel to see what kind of price action we could anticipate. Would it come down and test this pivot high here, or just bounce off of this pivot low? Because there is a low volume area right here, so pay attention to that when it comes down there. So we'll take a look at that when it get there. Looking at Twitter here, see Twitter on this intraday chart got a trading band here, essentially kind of been hovering around this trading band, ever since the post earning. So right now it seems like it is trying to get back to the top of the band once again. So I'm looking to see would it be able to break out of this band and at least come back up to this post earning date VPOX up here somewhere around 34.75. So I'm basically looking for a breakout of somewhere around 33.50. Let me see what's the high on this thing here. It's 33.62 and here 36.61. So essentially you're looking for somewhere around that 33.62, 60, 61 area. So you can see that it is forming sort of like a higher low, and taking a look at the daily, also have another channel here that indicating that it could be a channel instead of a trading band. Now one could say that this could be a bear flag, and if we break below this low here, which is the post earning low, the day after that is 31.07. So if break 31, then chances are that it broke this bear flag and maybe it had lower. Okay. Looking at Alibaba here, it ever since it broke this pivot low, it just came straight down, and right now it appeared to get a little bit of a bounce off of these lows here. So we're gonna see would it be able to come back up and maybe come up and tag this pivot low here that it broke previously, somewhere around this 181 area. And if it's not, then basically looking for the possibility of coming down to fill this gap between 163.50 and 160.35. So looking at the intraday, see this trend line coming down. So it's tagging this trend line. There is quite a few of VPOC above. So first one here 175.11, and then the next one is 177.99. This one below here at 167.64. So we'll be keeping an eye on these level. On if it break this trend line and get above this here, this high over here, this pivot high, somewhere around 175.70, then it could maybe possibly reverse this short-term or intermediate-term trend here. Then essentially it will put in a higher high and higher low. Looking at Facebook on this weekly chart, it really depicts how much of a sell-off it had after the post earning. You can see right now it is still unable to get back above this level here that I have, and right now it seems like it might come down to test this trend line here somewhere around this 167, 168 area. And if this trend line doesn't hold, then essentially I'm looking at these pivot low down here, 148, right, and possibly come down to this trend line near the 141. And this is a very long-term trend line here. And we'll take a look at the intraday. So you can see on the intraday, it's trying to bounce back up and got above the post-earning pivot high here, but unable to come down and put in a higher low here and pushes up to form a higher high. So right now it's still coming down, and be watching this level here, this low. Okay, so essentially got a VPOX down here at 167 or 168 area. We're going to see would it be able to come down and tag this and be able to get a bounce off that, or put in a lower low. If it come down below this low here, which is 166.56, then it will put in a low low. Then I expect it to go down much further. Essentially looking at these, breaking down this lower low here, we'd be looking at this trend line, breaking this trend line 167 and come down to this pivot low. This is the let's see, 166.56. Here looking at Apple, you can see after the earning pop, it just basically came up, consolidated a bit, and it surges up once again. It is at a all-time high, and looking at the intraday, you see that right here is where it balances itself. Got a little balance, and it broke out of balance and move up. Essentially, this is like a P profile. Got a little bit short covering, right? And then now on last Friday is more of a trending day, so it's a trend day. And right now, I wouldn't be shorting Apple yet because I think there could be a possibility of moving higher. But of course, it also could reverse back down. But I will be looking for some sort of price action telling me that it has, run its course on the upside for now and then reverse back down. Then I'll be looking at the possibility of the Apple pulling back, and this VPOX here will most likely get tested, and this gap is going to get filled. Originally, after this earning and when it popped, I was essentially looking for this zone to get the retest, pull back and then make a run or something like that. But that did not occur. And when it continued to move up, then was basically looking at when it pulled back, looking at this zone for this thing to pull back. But as you can see, it did not. It's basically just held its ground above this area, and now it's had broken out of this balance. So you essentially see this 3-day balance here, and it broke through that, and right now it just keep on moving higher. So basically right now I'm just watching it. So there's no long, basically I'm not going to be chasing it up, on the long side, and I'm not going to try to, try to counter trend trading Apple on the downside right now, at least not yet. Looking at Amazon, see this all-time high here, and then starting pull back. We got a inside bar break over here, and then form another inside bar, and it got a break on Friday on the inside bar. Then it kind of bounces back from the intraday low and finish off with a sort of a hammer here, and that could be the pinning effect on Friday. So because it's close, pretty close to that 1880 mark. Looking for the possibility of continuation coming down to this trend line here, possibly testing this trend line. And if it's going to bounce up, going to be looking at the all-time high as a potential resistance. And on the intraday chart here, you can see here's the inside bar, broke, inside bar, and then broke here, and then come back up. So right now there's a VPOX up here at somewhere around 1899 or 1890. So we'll be looking at 1890 as a potential resistance. And then down here near the trend line, we also got a VPOX down here, 1845.80. So it'll be somewhere around 1846, 1845 area. So those are the two levels to keep an eye on for the short term. And again, like I said, if it break above this pivot, then we're probably looking for it to come back up and try to retest the all-time high. But there's if we see another breakdown of this low here, and come down to this VPOC and break this trend line, I'll be looking at coming back down to these lower level here, possibly at 1761 area for potential test of support here, and then the big pivot low here at 1739.32. Looking at Netflix, see this Netflix post-earning candle here, and a bunch of candles. Seems to be, inside, quoting inside within this this big candle, and it broke through it, and it came back in and formed a little bit of a bear flag or a channel. Then it broke this channel and got a little, doing a little bit of a measure move from this pivot high down to this pivot low, and got this 100 retracement. So essentially, we trace this swing here. And right now, essentially, looking at this 127 and also coincide with this pivot low here, somewhere around 305.73, and the 127 extension down is 307.52. Then the next area of support, if this support doesn't hold, looking at this 294.08, which is 161 extension, or the 292.61, this pivot low here. So if we take a look at the intraday, you can see that right now, last Friday, there seems to be a little bit of a B profile. So we got a little bit of liquidation going on. So I'm going to keep an eye on that to see what it get a little bit of a short squeeze coming up next week, and maybe possibly try to tag this VPOX here up at 327, or essentially just continue to come down and tag this VPOX 304.57. Looking at Google, since it hit an all-time high after post-earning here, it pulled back and almost filled this gap here, then got a nice bounce. And unfortunately, it wasn't able to put in a new all-time high to push it up to a higher high. And instead, it pulled back and completely filled this gap, and now it's putting in a lower low. So we're going to see would it be able to come back up and put in another lower high, and possibly, essentially, maybe I'm kind of looking at this level here as potential resistance, and also could be in confluence with this trend line down here. And if we take a look at the intraday, also kind of put in another trend line here to put in a possibility of a price channel. So it could come down to this area here, right, somewhere around this pivot low, okay, near the 1192. And if it break this trend line, then probably looking at this pivot low here, somewhere around 1182. It's also got a little bit of a low volume area here. Okay, so those are the level that I'll be keeping an eye on. On the upside, here's the VPOX here at 1239.48, so somewhere around 1240, and it could take a little time to come up, and it could be get close to this trend line here. But if it come down up, break above this VPOX, but unable to break this trend line to put in a higher high, essentially got to get above this pivot high here, around 1271, 1272. Then we'll essentially be looking at a continuation on this lower high, lower low. I wouldn't be surprised this thing just maybe get a little bit of a move up here, and might not be even come up to this VPOX and just continue to one-time framing down to this channel here, somewhere around this pivot low, before we see a little bit of a bounce off of maybe 1192. And looking at Micron on this daily chart, as you can see, Micron booked this intermediate trend line and came down to this support zone here. Seems to be getting a little bit of a bounce. So we'll be watching to see would it be able to bounce back up to this 5910 area. And last Friday, you see the session is pretty much like a short covering once you get down here. So we got a little bit of a P profile. And also we still have a VPOX up here from the previous day that hasn't been tagged. So most likely we probably see that get tagged, and to see would it be able to come up and start forming a little bit of a high up here, and then come back down, form a higher low, and then pushes back up, and try to work back up to that 49 area here, maybe possibly fill this gap. That would be a start of reverse this downtrend on Micron. So, but if it can't hold this level here and it break below this 45.30, then we'll probably see this trend line get tested and possibly get down to these area here, somewhere around 39.81. So just have to keep an eye on that to see would it be able to get a bounce and come up and possibly fill this low gap, and essentially also this pivot low. Looking at Intel here, you see Intel, essentially I was looking at this as a earlier head and shoulder, this right here, right? And essentially this baseline, and book here came down and do a little shake and bake and then come back down here. So right now there are probably people looking at this as a head and shoulder, right? So basically looking at this, and that's also could be a possibility, but I'm essentially looking for a possible bounce here and come back up, although it backtests this trend line here. Looking at here to see would it be able to come up and possibly fill this gap and put in a high here, then come down and see would it be able to form a higher low and sort of reverse this trend here. Because the other things that is looking at is basically this trend line. So would it be coming back up and attack this trend line here, right? Okay. And if this can't hold, then essentially I'm looking the possibility of working itself down to this pivot low here, or these lows down here, and then ultimately this particular low, 42.03. Looking at the intraday, so got a nice little bounce off the open last Friday, although it pulled back a little bit on the close. It is getting into the zone here, and there's a VPOX up here that is need to be tagged. So if we get a bounce, looking at the 48.16 as a possible target for next week. And if it continue to do a one-time framing down, then I'll be looking at this VPOX somewhere around 45.84 for potential support here, and then see what happened. Here looking at NVDA, here's a post-earning drop and book this trend line here on a daily basis. Could be coming back down to this pivot low. Looking at the intraday, here's the liquidation break profile, more of a B profile. So probably see a little bit of continuation on the downside if it doesn't get a bump. And I'll be looking at these, this particular pivot low here somewhere around 241.21. And if that doesn't provide much of a bounce, then essentially I'm looking for this thing to come down to test this zone here somewhere around 235 and 233. So if it's on the upside, then I'll be looking at this VPOX up at 254, near the 254. Essentially somewhere around 254.26. Looking at AMD, see this earning pop, and initially I thought this would be the earning pop top, but it did pull back a little bit. You see this big bearish candle coming down the following day, essentially setting up a evening star type of pattern, but not much of a follow through. It seems to find some support here, and then it just put in a series of one-time framing up, and got a little bit of a pullback, so form a little bit of a higher low, and it pushes up to a new high here, post-earning high, and then it now it's kind of pulling back. So I'm looking for the possibility of a pullback down to this trend line, essentially this pivot low, if it continue to pull back, or if it break this little bit of a resistant trend line here. We'll take a closer look on the intraday. Break this, then we'll probably see another test of the high here. So we go and take a look at the intraday. So essentially I'm looking to see would it be able to break above this trend line and come up to this pivot high, which is somewhere around 2007. If we get up to 2007, then we'll probably maybe try to make a run at another high here, pushing above this high. But if I'm resistant here near this trend line and push back, dip below this pivot low here, somewhere around what's that, 1873, then be looking at this little bit of a high volume zone here, high volume, low volume area. So see would it be able to get a little bit of a bounce off of here, because there's a lot of price acceptance here, and if it can't hold this, then essentially I'm looking at that pivot low here, this $18 area, and that coincide with that daily upward trend line here. Pretty much, if it depending how long it take to come down to this pivot low. Alright, finally, let's take a look at the VIX here. You can see got a little bit of a spike up in the middle of the week on the VIX and pull back. I'm looking for continuation of a pullback and back down here to the zone here, somewhere below the around the 11. So I'm looking forward to come back into this the zone between 10 and 11 here before we see a little bit of a spike, because as you can see from the indexes basically looking for a move toward the potential toward the new high there. So we'll see how this work out, because anything is possible, because it could also spike up and get back up to this 18 to 20 level, near the 20 level here. So that's also a possibility. So again, essentially just keep an eye on this. If you find this video to be useful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're not a YouTube subscriber of my video channel, click on the subscribe button to subscribe, and also turn on the notification. Then every time that I post a new YouTube video, you'll be notified.